All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight for this community conversation on arts and conservation. I'm Max Hjortsberg. I know many of you here, but for those that who don't know me, I'm the conservation director with Park County Environmental Council here in Livingston, Montana. We're your local nonprofit environmental advocacy organization working to protect the lands, water, wildlife, and people of Yellowstone's Northern Gateway. Just a couple things I want to remind everyone of before we jump right in. In a week, we're having our rendezvous. If you haven't registered, signed up, please do so and join us. It's going to be great. We have a wonderful lineup of guest speakers, and unfortunately, it too is going to have to be virtual this year. But we'll make the most of it, just as we are now. And so we welcome you all to be a part of that. And I'd also like to extend a big hearty thank you before we get going to all of our artists who are here tonight and those who can't be here tonight, who are helping to make this, this art auction possible. Tom Murphy and Parks Reece, who are with us tonight, and then Edd Enders and Louise Johns, who are unable to join us tonight, but have sent us remote messages that we'll play for you in a little bit via video. We decided this year to kind of add an extra dimension to our year-end fundraising campaign, and I'd have to give credit to one of our board members, Karen Cochran, for spearheading this arts conservation auction. We wanted to showcase and highlight local artists who have worked with us, who have worked in the conservation world, who also just see Park County in ways that perhaps some of us haven't yet. The way they illuminate and illustrate some of the beauty and the dynamics of this area, the people who live here, the wildlife that we coexist with in Park County. And we wanted to kind of provide something, maybe more of an incentive for people, a little something to get you involved, and then also a little way to give back. So with a little bit of an auction, a little bit of a fundraiser, you get a really amazing piece of art from one of these artists in the process. And so this is our first art auction that we've done, especially an internet art auction. So it's all online since we're not in person. So there will be a link in the chat box as well. I think Carrie will put that in there. That'll take you to the auction site. You can look at the art, learn about the artists, and then bid on your favorite piece of art. And it's all gonna raise money for PCEC and help carry us into the next year with all the work that we have looking forward to in the next year. So that's a little bit about why we're gathered here. But mainly we're here to talk about the art, to talk with the artists, to have a conversation, and to kind of, the way I've been thinking about it as we've been gearing up for this is to talk about how arts and conservation, how those two sometimes seemingly different things really can come together, have come together, not only on PCEC campaigns, but on others, and how arts and conservation are really closely tied together in many ways on many different levels. I'll start with, when I think about it, I start thinking about how humans have been painting and creating art, as far as we know, for at least 40,000 years, if not longer. And we have pictographs and rock art all around this area and all around the Intermountain West in this country, made by indigenous peoples that illustrated the world that they lived in, the environment that they lived in at that time, and how they interacted with it. So this component of artistic expression and illustrated and looking at the natural world around us, the wildlife around us has been a part of, I would say, our shared human culture for longer than we can remember, time immemorial, as some like to say. And so that carries through, even so now, and I think very much so with the artists that we have with us tonight, and probably many others who live in this area, or many of the other artists throughout the world. But another great thing that I want to talk about, and it will be a part of this, is how art has helped to inspire conservation, has helped to inspire conservation movements. When we think about all of the arts, I think often we most immediately refer to literary art, writing, books. We think of the works of people like Alda Leopold or Rachel Carson or Terry Tempest Williams as being critical to conservation movements. But I won't disagree with that, but I also think that the visual arts have had as profound an effect on conservation as the literary arts and the other art and other artistic forms. But it's not, but it's in a way that, when you have a literary work, you can refer to it, you can quote from it. Whereas a work of visual art, that's something that can hit you instantaneously. You don't need any sort of time with it. You don't have to read the whole thing. You can walk into a room, see a beautiful work of art, and be moved by it in, flash of like a lightning bolt hit. And I think probably the most well-known example that I can think of that would illustrate this locally is the artwork that was produced by Thomas Moran, and the photographs of William Henry Jackson of Yellowstone National Park during some of those earliest explorations. Those works of art were taken back east, shown to members of Congress, and inspired, wowed, awed, stunned people who had never seen this area, knew nothing about it, had only heard stories, tall tales, maybe some scientific reports. Those works of art, I feel, were instrumental in the creation of our first national park, and that concept of setting aside a landscape for public to enjoy, and for to set this example that has spread throughout the world. Now we have national parks and many other countries that are inspired in many ways from a painting and a photograph. And so that's, as I thought through this, and part of what got me thinking is when we were starting our Yellowstone Gateway Mine campaign, I believe it was Michelle met with Parks, and they were talking, and Parks created the painting that's part of this auction to do just that, to help support the conservation effort, to help illustrate it, to help draw attention to it in a way that could just be easily communicated without a lot of technical jargon, data, all those things that can tire a person out pretty quickly. And so, and then I think of the work that Tom does, the way he captures wildlife, wild places in such a way that, allows a viewer to experience them without having, without having to be there. Many of us can't. We don't have the unbridled strength that Tom does to venture deep into the wilderness and spend long periods of time that it takes to observe and to capture those moments. And so we're talking about art and photography. I think that's also why, film and documentary video works are so effective as well, is that they can capture that visual component that is so important in conveying the importance of conservation and provide the narrative and the story that, comes with the literary aspect. So that is a strong component, but we're not auctioning off any videos, but I think that, it's taken for granted, but art has a very important role in conservation and has played an important role, and I think is a very effective tool in any conservation movement. And so we here with PCEC, we try to incorporate it as much as we can, and we've done so successfully, and I think we will continue to do so. Our artists are great allies in that effort. So that, I just wanted to kind of set the tone, the kind of the concepts of what we were thinking behind this for everyone to think about, because art connects us. It connects us as people. It connects us to places. It makes things more familiar for those that it's not very familiar. And it also is a way it brings people together, and it draws the human component into sometimes what's often a very abstract effort when we're talking about conservation and landscapes and wildlife. If people don't have a connection to that, some of the importance can get lost. And it can challenge us too. I think, art as a very important way of challenging the way we're thinking, challenging the way we look at the world, or challenging our concept of it in itself. And I think, to speak for the two artists who aren't with us, Edd Enders, and you'll see in his video, he makes a point of painting the Western landscape as it is and exists right now in our contemporary time. So that includes highways, freight trains, barbed wire fences, things that we try or maybe romanticize and try to ignore, and maybe try to look the other way at the empty landscape when the highway is right behind us. Edd will go to the other side of the road and put the road in the foreground for us. And then, of course, we all live here. We all share this place and experience. And I think, Louise Johns, photographer, is a beautiful portraitist. She can capture the people on the landscape in a very powerful way and dynamic way. You see them moving, even though it's a still photograph. So that allows us to connect to a place. It can challenge our perception, and it can inspire us to protect it, preserve it, and steward it, which is kind of the core of any conservation movement. So I will now jump into the artist portion. I'm going to share my screen with everyone. We're going to start with the two videos and the two works of art by our artists who are not with us, and then we'll jump to Tom and Parks, and I will let them talk about their artwork. I won't need to explain it. They can speak to it better than anyone else. So I'm going to start this now, and hopefully the video quality works. Everything is smooth. Trying to get it set up so that it can stream to you. So let me know if there are any issues, and then along the way, as we start talking about the art, if you have any ideas or questions, you can put them in the chat box, and we can try to address them as they come up. And we're also going to be having an opportunity at the end of the presentations for a general Q&A and conversation amongst us all. So we will save some time before we end for that as well. So I just want to let you know that that's how we'll be going forward. So let me start the screen share, and Okay, so can everyone see my screen now?
Mm-hmm.
So
Good.
this is Edd Enders' painting that he donated to us for the auction. It's a landscape. When I talked to Ed first about this, I just said, would you provide a painting that that you feel captures the essence of Park County in your eyes? And we know Ed has painted this county from almost every single corner. If you know Ed, you've probably seen his artwork around. Quite a few of his paintings have been hanging in Glenn's Park Place Tavern. He's had many shows. He has a wonderful way of seeing this area, and he does, in my opinion, masterful work with colors that take a landscape and transform it in ways that are abstract but yet still very concrete in his imagery. So this is a scene from somewhere in Park County, mountain range in the background, and then of course Ed's touch. There's the fence line running through just to remind us that we are on this landscape as well. So I will jump to his video now.
Well, my grandmother was an artist, and then her father was an artist. And although very, very different art than I do now, but I was always really, really fascinated with their paintings, like when I'd see them and I'd be a little kid. And so then I had an interest in art, and through grade school, I did a lot of, sketches and cartoons and doodling, sort of. But then, as I said earlier, when I got into high school, that wasn't really the cool thing to do. So I didn't really do, I had an art class in high school and had a really good art teacher. But that just wasn't cool. So and then when I got out of high school, I went into hunting and guiding and wrangling and packing and cowboy and working on oil rigs and all this other stuff. And it was only after 10 years that I really became interested in art, because I went to college and I learned about, Rembrandt or Van Gogh or Andy Warhol, and the significance that art has in terms of humanity. I'm not really trying to make any statement in any paintings that I'm doing. I'm just saying, this is what I see and this is how I'm going to portray it. But if I see and like I said, the contemporary West is just it's a land of rape and pillage. It always has been, and I'm going to portray that. So if that means doing whatever we do as humans, I mean, that what I want to do as an artist is portray what's actually happening at the time, and that's a big part of the West in general is extraction. So I'm going to portray that, and same here too. I'm hopefully going to portray, some of the development that's going on right around here. So yeah, I want to have in all my paintings a human impact, even in my most pristine landscape. That's why you'll see an interstate running through it or whatever,
Well, there we just heard from Ed. Hopefully that I'm going to try to change a setting to make it a little smoother for everyone on the next video. And then we'll start here. We're looking at a photograph from Louise. And Karen, if you wanted to, you said you had a couple things you'd like to say for this. I'll let you go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Max. Louise used this particular photograph as sort of the centerpiece for her show that Old Main Gallery did for her this summer. And when I walked in to see her show and I saw this piece, I just almost lost my legs under me. It was just so stunning and so stark and so real. I thought it was quite remarkable, and Louise was extremely generous to donate this piece to us. The piece is framed. It's in the backyard at the Anderson Ranch, and in many ways it exemplifies a lot of her energy and focus around building community through her photography. And I really admire that about her. She has a wonderful talk, which if you go to her website, you can look at it, a TEDx talk on, it's called Seeing with Heart. And I think all of her pictures are indicative of her ability to see with heart. But you would be very interested to hear her conversation at the TED Talk about why she does photography and how she uses it as an instrument to bring people together and to focus, as Max said, on the issues of conservation and the importance of keeping our wildlife, our wild places wild. Anyway, she's a National Geographic photographer. She's got a master's in photojournalism from University of Montana. And at this point, makes Tom Minor her home. She will be, she's doing some assignments in Columbia, South Carolina. She's doing assignments in Columbia, South America. And she's also been in South Africa and done a lot of beautiful, beautiful pictures of her work there in those communities. So I'm very pleased that Louise could, so I'll let her words speak for herself.
All right, I will move forward.
I'm Louise Johns, and I am a photojournalist, and I live here in the Paradise Valley. And I am originally from rural Virginia, grew up near Shenandoah National Park, and moved to Missoula, Montana in 2010 to go to college, and have never left Montana. This is home now. Right now I'm sitting in the barn at the Anderson Ranch, and I'm just a few hundred yards from where I took the photograph that will be part of this PCEC auction. And that photograph was taken a couple years ago during a spring thunderstorm. I was standing outside in the barnyard photographing towards the back of the basin, just this amazing formation of clouds and dark clouds, and moving through this incredible landscape and over the mountain peaks and high alpine. As the storm was rolling through, it was kind of raining on and off, and I stepped outside and there was lightning all over, but I was photographing the barnyard, and you see the chickens in the photograph. They were all kind of a little bit frenetic with all the animals were a bit frenetic with this storm going on and kind of running to take cover. And as I was photographing, a lightning struck the Sawtooth Peak back there, and I was clicking my camera right at that moment, and it was a stroke of luck. Most people have to use lightning meters in order to in order to capture lightning. And I just got really lucky by looking through my camera and continuing to photograph this scene as it unfolded. And I think that's one of the beauties of photography, and also one of the things that makes photography and photojournalism challenging, and also creating special moments that can move people and that evoke feelings and that evoke strong emotions in people. And it's, for the photographer, it's being in the right place at the right time and being patient and just continuing to do that over and over and over again. And I spent several years at that point in this landscape and many thunderstorms, and it took, you know, being in the right place at the right time in order to capture that. And when I look at the photograph now, it really reminds me of how alive Tom Minor Basin is, and just how alive this landscape is. You know, there's the top carnivores that live in the Yellowstone ecosystem. They're right here on the border, the northern border of the park in Tom Minor Basin. And we live surrounded by so much aliveness up here, and same in Paradise Valley. We're just an offshoot of Paradise Valley in Tom Minor Basin. And so when I look at that photograph, it just reminds me what a gift it is to be in this part of this wild, alive place, and to be living here, and what a gift for all of us that live in these places to be responsible for helping shape these landscapes and being so shaped and moved by the landscapes themselves. I'm honored to have my photograph as part of PCEC's auction. I really respect the work that PCEC does in this community for people, wildlife, and rural open landscapes, and trying to preserve the integrity of these places. It's really important work that they do in this community of humans and non-humans, and just honored to have my photograph be a part of this fundraising event. So I hope you will support PCEC. I hope you will donate, and I'm proud to donate my photograph to this community organization. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Louise. Now we're going to shift out of our virtual meeting where we have our participants virtually in place, and now we'll move into our guest, Tom. First, we'll bring Tom Murphy in.
I'm Louise.
Here's the image that Tom donated to the auction. I think many of you know Tom. He's lived in Livingston since 1975, and I think he has explored this area more deeply and more thoroughly than just about anyone else, especially Yellowstone National Park. In fact, he was one of the first, I think he was the first person to license to lead photography tours in the park. I will say that Tom has been very generous to PCEC. He's been on the board from the get-go, from the very beginning. He helped get the organization started over 30 years ago. He's a board member emeritus now. And we're really proud to have him still be a part of the organization. I think one of the greatest things he's done is every year for the last few years, he's taken the PCEC staff on a backpacking adventure somewhere in Yellowstone. Really beautiful areas. It's been a really wonderful treat to have him do that for us. We feel very fortunate in that regard, and it's also a wonderful way for us to decompress and check out and spend some time in this place that we work so hard to steward and protect. And so I can't speak highly enough about Tom. In fact, one of my life goals is to be backpacking when I'm 70 years old and exploring this area. at that time. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Tom, and you can talk to us about this photo and about your work.
Thanks, Max. Thanks for Park County Environmental Council. I'm really, really proud that it's done so well, particularly with the staff and the board and the volunteers and the members at this point. There's a lot of work to do, but it's worth it. And that's why Bonnie and I moved here a long time ago. We recognized this was an unusually spectacular place. So my goal is to tell the story of wildlife. There's people photographing lots of other things. I grew up on a cattle ranch in western South Dakota, and spent my life around wildlife, or animals. Some cows were pretty wild, but because of my experience on a cattle ranch, I really don't like cows or horses because they always meant work to me. But I loved being outside. I loved learning about why they do what they do. And it transferred to wildlife pretty quickly. And Yellowstone is the core of a huge, wonderful, wild place. We're profoundly lucky. In Livingston, Montana, I can drive an hour or less and see grizzly bears, wolves, bison, elk, all these spectacular creatures. And I think it's kind of pretty close to the center of the universe for me. And so I felt early on that I needed to really understand wildlife as much as I could. My analogy is, if you want to consistently get good photographs of a baseball game, you need to know the rules of baseball. Otherwise, I have no idea what's going on out there. So what I started to do early on was sleep in the dirt a lot and hike way off in where, unlike Edd Enders, where I get away from people and their manufactured world. And because very few people do that, and I like to think that by skiing across Yellowstone Park, sleeping in snowbanks, and I don't know how many thousands of miles I've done that, and that my work is more informed somehow. I hope so. I like to think that because if I can understand why they do what they do, why they move seasonally, where they're going to pick their routes to go from one end of the valley to the next, that what an opportunity to see, I can tell that story better. And so this particularly photograph been an interesting example, I guess, of how lousy I am at marketing. This one has become extremely popular around the world because somebody stole it. A fellow in Belarus claimed it was his photograph of a yak. Yaks look a little like a bison, but not a lot. And some good friends, this was on Instagram. People were on Instagram, I'm not. And they said, that's not your photograph, that's Tom Murphy's photograph. And long story short, a lot of people, to their great credit, started pushing back at this guy. And BBC has an Instagram account. They did an article about my work and a couple other European magazines. And I guess it's on Facebook now, oftentimes without my name on it, which is frustrating. But at least people are seeing this beautiful bison cow. And she was standing in the Upper Geyser Basin, and her power and her endurance, that's what captured my attention. She and I were the only ones out there wandering around. There were some other bison off in the distance, but she was just standing there, and her strength and endurance, like I said, I really felt awed by this creature. And bison are one of my favorite animals. evolved in Asia, and they came across the land bridge about 250,000 years ago, and they've adapted really well here until we showed up. But fortunately, Yellowstone is critical, and wildland is critical to their survival, and they're doing pretty well now, as long as we let them be bison. And so I think what I'd like people to take away from this photograph is her beauty, as well as her adaptation to being here, and her, in a sense, her comfort. I mean, you think, oh, that's not comfortable to stand there next frost, but she was. I mean, she was just waiting, sunrise light on her there, just waiting for it to warm up a little bit so she could get something to eat. And I don't pay much attention to Instagram or Facebook, but I read a few comments about it, and it goes a lot of comments about this Game of Thrones nonsense. I tried to watch one Game of Thrones show and I thought it was ridiculous, but so I hope they don't tie it up with that goofy television show. But wild country and wild strength, that's what I want people to take away from this photograph.
Mm.
I agree that's what you see in that photograph for sure. Thank you, Tom. That was a really wonderful summary and great perspective on that photograph of yours. Now I will we'll move to the next one by Parks Reece. Parks Reece, originally born in North Carolina, grew up in a very artistic family. His mother was a painter, and he learned finger painting from Ruth Fias Shaw, who was the originator of the finger painting medium, which I love. You can see that finger painting technique in this painting. Parks has traveled extensively and studied art, but I think his greatest contribution is aside from his art, is that he has been an art teacher. He has taught art in many places in Montana and around the world. In fact, Parks taught me art in my third grade class at Pine Creek School. We painted a mural in the basement, and I got to paint a bird, and I painted a bird with the legs dangling down as it was flying, and I'll never forget this. Parks said, "Well, have you ever seen a bird fly?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I've seen birds fly." And he said, "Do you ever see birds fly with their legs dangling down like that?" And I said, "Well, you're right." They said they tuck them in, and that was the first, like, when first realization for me as a very young person that the power of observation and art are intertwined, and it doesn't always have to be perfectly presented, but there are certain qualities and certain characteristics when depicting something else that you need to be very observant of. And I think Parks is a very keen observer, but he also has a mischievous sense of humor, and you can see that in all of his artwork. He loves to play with it in a way, and I think that way he uses humor in his art really it opens it up to more and more greater appreciation of what he's trying to convey. So I will stop talking about Parks's art and let Parks talk to us about this painting and his art. So take it away, Parks.
Okay, thanks, Max. Yeah, I remember teaching you. I didn't quite remember saying that, but I'm glad you reminded me. I've always loved teaching, and I think for 39 years I've taught in every school around, and a lot of them around the state, and at various locations, at art galleries and such. And I've always taught for free, and I've always people changed my life. My mother did, and Ruth Fias Shaw. They changed my life by teaching me that art was fun and a great way to learn and observe life and the world around you. So I was happy to pass it on. But for this painting, well, I guess I should say first, I grew up in the Blue Ridge region of the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina, in a fairly isolated area. I didn't have many neighbors. And so every morning I hit the woods when I didn't have to go to school. Sometimes I'd lay out of school to do this. I would go into the woods, and until close to dark, I would hear my mother coming to look for me, and I'd need to run back. But that got me very interested in nature. I observed a lot of things, and that was the beginning of my eye-opening experience of nature, and I still carry that on. And this painting is what Karen and some other folks from PCEC rushed into the gallery one day and said, they're going to build a gold mine, and they're going to ruin the valley. They're going to build it on the edge of Yellowstone Park and on the Zorka Beartooth Wilderness. And you got to paint a painting as our focal point for us fighting the mine. They're powerful and they've got a lot of money, and we've got a big challenge here. So I said, well, I'm busy. I'll get it to you in about a month. And they said, no, you got to do it now. So I dropped everything and I did it. And so what I've got going on here is that's the actual mountain scene there. There's Chico down in the bottom. You can see a little bit. And so that's about the area they would have built the mine. And so I've got a facsimile of a miner digging out, and he's displacing and hurting and killing and throwing with his symbolic shovel the fishermen away, the wild animals, the everything, the water, and he's doing it for money. And ultimately, and then I think I coined that phrase, is the title of this is Paradise is More Valuable Than Gold. And anyway, I believe it helped some, and they won. The actual true fighters on the line won. And I'm very happy that you guys led that fight. You did good. So, I believe about nature and art. I believe that humans are hardwired ever since we've evolved as humans. I believe we're hardwired to keenly pay attention to nature, because that's where our food came from. That's where danger came from. We had to look hard to find something to eat. We had to look hard to make sure not to be eaten by predators. And it's hardwired into our brain. Nature is. And a lot of people don't get out into nature because we've urbanized so much. I'm lucky enough, like Tom and you, I get to get out a lot, and I do. And the predominance of the meat that I eat is what I hunt. And I'm not a trophy hunter or anything. I'm just a subsistence hunter. And I've done that for about 40 years. And that in itself gets me out, and you observe something you've never seen before every time you go out into the wilderness. And it's a constant learning experience. But I'm also presenting some humor in what I do, because I do some environmental things. I try to point out things we could do better, things where we could preserve our world. And I try to do that with humor rather than a serious lecturing tone. So I present a lot of my things with humor, such as some of this painting that you're looking at. And anyway, I'm also poking fun at the art world. I was an abstract expressionist in San Francisco for a while. I went to San Francisco Art Institute, and I've made some official art people unhappy by calling the art world the emperor's new clothes syndrome. So anyway, I'm not sure how long I'm supposed to talk, but I guess I'll leave it at that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Parks. I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
bring us all back into the Zoom room here. So before we get started with the conversation and Q&A, I want to say one of the requirements, I think, Parks, when you gave us that painting was you said we had to sell it to raise money for the organization. So here we are finally, years later, after a successful campaign, offering as a part of this auction. So now that everyone has seen and heard from all of these artists and seen the paintings, I really strongly encourage you to head over to the auction site after we're done tonight and put a bid in on one of these pieces, and you'll be able to take it home with you. And then you will also be helping out PCEC in a very great way. So I encourage you all to do that, and also to let all of your friends know. Maybe they have a blank wall somewhere in their home that one of these pieces of art would look perfect in. So share the word, spread it around, and now we'll wrap things up here in the last few minutes. Open it up to questions. Anything anyone wants to share or ask Tom or Parks about their creative process or their art. We'll get going. I see Louise, you raised your hand here in the Zoom thing, so we'll start there, and then anyone else can follow.
Yeah, well, first, I just wanted to thank both Parks Reece and Tom Murphy for not only donating your work, but donating your time for this as well. I think a couple of people have already mentioned in the chat that this has been nothing short of heartwarming. So thank you to the both of you and to all the artists that have done that. This is a two-part question, and you've kind of already gone into this a little bit, but I kind of wanted to ask the both of you, what draws you as a person, but more than anything as an artist, towards conservation efforts in Park County and towards the work that PCEC does specifically? I don't know who wants to answer that one first.
What draws me to making these photographs is to give something back. I don't think you're a good citizen unless you give back to your community, to your profession. And so one of the things I'd like continually to do is figure out, I mean, I like to eat, so trying to make a living at this, but more importantly, in the long run, how does it help my community? How does it help the world? And bison are, I mean, it's a national mammal, for whatever that means. Yeah, but it is a symbol of the Wild West. Wild West, not in terms of the goofy television shows, but in terms of nature. And we came from nature. Parks alluded to that a bit ago. I mean, my Norwegian ancestors, like only 40 generations ago, were fishermen in a little wooden boat. They were really close to the land, and we still are, even if we don't want to admit it. Our food comes from the dirt, and we and it's important that we maintain that connection, because if we lose that connection, it's done. So I try to contribute a little bit in my own way to that.
Yeah, I want to contribute too. I want to give back, and I'm glad that PCEC is protecting the places I love. And I'll add there that I think when I was a kid, and I think the last generation, I kind of think there's a feeling that the earth is there for us to extract wealth. I mean, I don't think our ancestors were evil for that. I just think that's kind of how it was. And we've done that so well and so much that now we're starting to see the strong evidence that we're screwing it up. And I believe more and more people are catching on to that, but some aren't, because that's the way things have sort of always been done. And so it takes education and eye-opening to point out, let's figure out another way to do stuff where we get to save, we don't poop in our own nest, you know?
And the second question that I had for the both of you was, how have you used your medium in the past to focus more attention towards these conservation efforts?
Go ahead, Parks.
Oh, well, I was just going to say real quick, some of mine are pointed. In other words, I'll tackle an issue like, I can't really show you. There's some behind me, like there's there is global warming and how it works. And there's an Earth there, and there's a guy in space, and he's got a fire built under the Earth that he's fueling with gasoline. So that's global warming and how it works. I showed that in China, and they were particularly sensitive about their part in pollution. They censored it. They wouldn't show it. So I do specific things, and then I just look at nature a lot. I'm out there like Tom. I don't go quite as deep in most of the time, but I'm always out there in nature, and I'm studying and looking at it. And like I said, you learn something new every time you go out. And so all my stuff, all my art reflects nature, some of it more pointedly, some aspect of how we're polluting or something.
I don't think anyone goes as deep in as Tom, so you don't have to feel bad about that.
I used to go with Tom. He got me on search and rescue, and we would go looking for other people who got lost while looking at nature.
Search and rescue question. I had a meeting one time, and this young guy, about 35 years younger than me, said, whatever you do, don't put me with that guy that walks a lot.
Yeah,
It was me.
that's right. I've heard that.
So again, Parks, right. Every time I go out, I see something new and I see something spectacular and unusual. I don't always get a photograph of it, and it's not always photographable. I mean, just the experience of the feel of a light rain on your face and the smell of that moisture on the grass. I mean, that is, it makes me happy. And
Yeah.
so at some way, what I just kind of throw my stuff out there. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I'm terrible at promotion. I mean, I guess maybe I could be rich, but I don't really want that necessarily. I want the opportunity to be outside. And you don't get paid real well to be outside, but monetarily, but if what I can bring back can affect people in a positive way, I'm happy with that. I had a woman who worked for the military in Guam or someplace, and worked in cleaning up nuclear waste sites. And she sent me a really wonderful letter, said, looking at my books calms her. That's cool.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I would add it's an antidepressant too, running around in nature.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a little bit of time left. If anyone has a question they want to ask, you can just unmute your mic and ask away.
Max, do you want to talk a little bit about how long the bidding will go, how long people have to bid through the month, and then how they bid on this website, correct?
Right, the auction will be live for a month, I believe.
Okay.
So you can start tonight, or you can think about it, start tomorrow, and then keep an eye on it and keep bidding for 1 month's time.
The auction, just so everyone knows, the auction will close on November 30th at 5 p.m. So you'll have until then to bid. We've put the link in the chat and we'll put it in again. So please check it out.
Yes, Carrie put together the auction site, so she has those details fresh in her mind, whereas I have a vague understanding of how it all works. But thank you, Carrie. Yes, and it's very easy. You just click a button, and you're in it. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I don't want to keep people. I know you've got dinner perhaps awaiting, or kids that need attention, or an evening to yourself. So I think we can wrap it up. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank Tom and Parks for being here with us. And I'd like to thank Ed and Louise for contributing to this. And unfortunately, they couldn't be here with us. But you'll probably see them around town at some point. And hopefully we'll see you all again in a week's time at our rendezvous, virtual, same place, same time, same screen, as always. Hopefully next year it will be clear sailing for us all to get together in person. So thank you all for being a part of this. And go bid, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you.